episode 81 and season 2 finale of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian, just having finished my 13th year, I found myself asking the question, where is the podcast that will help me do my job? I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, by my interview guests, and the listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I'd like to extend a very special welcome this week to Michelle in Pennsylvania. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback, questions, and episode suggestions either on Facebook, Twitter, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. Please stay tuned after today's interview to learn how you can become a part of Season 3. And now for today's episode, Creating Community, and my interview with Wendy Cope. Listeners, I'm so excited today to be sharing a conversation I'm having with Wendy Cope. And Wendy Cope, I first of all want to start this episode giving you credit where credit is due. You are the reason why last week's episode on social emotional learning happened at all. And creating a podcast is a lot easier when listeners like you chime in. Can you just connect the dots for our listeners?
Well, you had put out the request and said, I think I had just messaged you on Twitter and said, hey, I'm loving what you're doing. You had done a podcast with my dear friend, Jennifer Lewis, who I'm fortunate enough to librarian with, and we are in the same county. And so, that was, I've been listening for a while, and then you messaged me this lovely thank you note and said, hey, if you know anybody else who does middle grades, we're interested. And I'm like, oh, let me tell you. And I gave you a whole list of folks who I thought were, and some of the specialties that they had been doing. And Martha, Martha and Sarah Sansbury have been just lighting up the board with tons of resources, but especially, social emotional learning. Martha's heart is so big. And so it's just a sweet spot for her library and her library program. So I'm so glad you took my advice.
I really appreciate that you thought to reach out to the podcast, because the fact that you and your cohort in Georgia can benefit from each other's expertise, selfishly, I would like to be able to broadcast some of this on a larger scale. And the fact is, within 24 hours, we had listeners in 48 states and, wow, a dozen countries who had listened to Martha. And that's just going to grow. And the fun thing about that is, while, it's great to have these leaders in our state, how much more exciting is it when we can share that with school librarians around the world? So I appreciate you taking into consideration lots of other people could benefit from this. So Wendy, would you please share for listeners, because we don't have the benefit of touring your library today, could you tell us a little bit about your current library program and the grades you teach, and a little bit, I know we're going to talk about your programming very soon, but tell us a little bit about your space that you work in.
Hey, so I am in a middle school, 6th through 8th grade, and I have about 1,200 kids. I'm in Northwest Atlanta and the metro area. And so I'm working with we're not quite Title I eligible, but we are really darn close. We have some kids who are very well off, and I have some kids who are paying weekly at a motel to live. I am in a kind of a fixed flex schedule. I do see every kid in the building every 2 weeks. I'm fortunate enough to have a relationship with our reading teachers that they see as a priority to come in. But then I also, there's a lot of teaching that happens in there, in the library as well. I am by myself. I am solo. I do not have a parapro, but I do have a lot of kids who come in, and they're willing to volunteer their time because they think the library is a valuable place to be. It's just I'm really loving being in middle school. It's just a great place.
Wonderful. You were recognized by the Cherokee County School District as the Media Specialist of the Year in 2015. And at the time you said, quote, "As a librarian, my job is to curate, not just my collection, but relationships." And you said, continuing, quote, "By knowing my students, our curriculum, and my teachers, I can anticipate our needs and facilitate the tasks at hand. Our library is a place of yes," end quote. And I'd really like to explore this idea of building relationships with your students. Could you share with listeners some of the strategies that have really worked for you when it comes to connecting with your students?
Well, I think at first it just starts off with saying, hey, and like saying, I'm really glad you're here. Learning the kids' names. Names have power. There's nothing that's more precious to us as having somebody call our name. And so I think that just even starting to recognize, hey, I see you. You are here, especially with our newest sixth graders, seventh and eighth grade, I've got them handled. But our newcomers the kids who come in new, and then the kids who are coming to our school for the very first time, I really do try to get to know them as much as I possibly can. And so, starting the conversation, say, hey, I noticed that you're wearing, tell me about your t-shirt. I mean, so there is a lot of things that I don't know. So they tend to think I'm kind of dumb, but it's like, I want to know their culture. What is it? What's that band? Tell me about that band shirt that you're wearing. What's that anime character? It's a lot of just those kind of conversations that say, I'm noticing some things about you. If you tell me about those things, maybe I'll learn about who you are in addition.
Yeah, I found that students are very intentional about middle schoolers are incredibly intentional. If it's a little string friendship bracelet they're wearing, if it's a pair of shoes, if it's a t-shirt, a lot of times what they're doing is almost asking for you to ask about them. And these are things that help them identify who they are as individuals. And obviously in the middle school, that is an evolution. That's a process that they're working through. So the fact that you show an interest in them as individuals, I imagine goes a long way. A coworker described you, and I'll quote here, quote, "Miss Cope has a gift for matching kids to books and leading reluctant readers to the well." And continuing with her quote, "These students think they hate to read. Wendy happily pulls books from the stacks. She knows books and she knows kids. The kids trust her judgment because she has never steered them wrong on a book," end quote. Librarians, we are matchmakers. We are definitely matchmakers. We are pairing our readers with books, but it isn't easy. And I am embarrassed to admit how often I strike out. Could you share with us what has helped you become so successful when it comes to engaging your reluctant readers? And I will just pause right here because it is interview season, friends. I think anybody who has recently interviewed will tell you that getting reluctant readers to read is going to be guaranteed asked on any librarian interview at any stage of the game. So you had best have an answer ready.
Right. Well, and I think it goes back to that whole, tell me something about yourself. I asked them, what are your favorite games? Because, our kids are video gamers, and that's how they experience narrative these days. What shows do you watch? What are you, are you an Avatar fan? What kind of Avatar, Avatar Last Airbender? What Avatar are you? What's your bending skill? Those kind of things, learning about the kids' culture allows me to kind of extrapolate that information and put it into the book, going to a different kind of narrative media. So instead of a gaming media or a video or a television show, for example, I can move that on. So for example, if a kid says, I love Avatar Last Airbender, I can move them over to Percy Jackson. I can move them over to, some of the Dasgupta books or any of the, Tome Adeyemi's, Children of Blood and Bone. I mean, those kind of books are going to, kind of hit those same spaces for those kids. They may not know that. I have a friend who said that her brother never read a book really until he was in his 30s. And he was staying at her house and he just picked up the Hunger Games. And he goes, I didn't know that a book could be like this. And so she always tells her kids, you just got to find your own Hunger Games. And, that's it. And a lot of times I do something, especially with our reluctant readers. I do ask them to fill out a survey and saying those, sometimes the same questions, what are your genres? I've genrefied my library, which makes it a whole lot easier on me and them. I did this about 5 years ago. And what was really great was that I hope that you know Nikki Robertson. If you don't know Nikki Robertson, you need to go follow her right now. She was the one who really connected me to a lot of ideas, and she was generous enough to allow me to come and visit her in Huntsville. And I was on my September break, and I went. I know I'm going on a great diversion right here, but it has a point. She had just been in the library for a month. This was a new school for her. She had already genrefied her library in the first month of her school. And she said to me, Wendy, you can do this. And because I was looking, and the kids, and this is in a high school, and, kids don't check out books in high school very much, no reading for pleasure. But by genrefying, her kids were very excited about what they were able to locate on their own. And so, that gave me the courage to come back right after my September break and say, okay, we're going to do this. I texted my kids on my library advisory and said, hey, would you like this? And they're like, oh, this would be amazing. I'm like, are you willing to put in some work? And they're like, yep. So having genrefied my library makes it a lot easier to be able to connect kids to the books that they want. Because as you and I both know, the first series of books to get checked out and they're never on the shelves again are the Wimpy Kid books. And kids are just like, I only like Wimpy Kid books. Well, that's not necessarily true. But if you've gotten all the humor books together in the collection, you can kind of work sideways. Once you've found a book that they like, you're like, oh, if you like that, you might want to try this. But the book is right there. And, in our library, we just have the yellow spine label covers, and that indicates humor. And it's a real quick, easy sell, and they don't have to. Yeah, it's a more bookstore approach. The other thing that I do, again, thanks to the great and good Martha Bongiorno, Martha has created this amazing genre personality quiz, kind of like a BuzzFeed quiz, about the type of person that you are. And so you answer all these personality questions and it matches you with your genre. And it talks about who you are as a person. And then it also, she has created a PDF that you can customize with your own library collection. So the kids have a bookmark that tells them a little something about themselves. And then it also connects them to a list of books immediately. It is the most genius activity. And I did it last year for the first time. And I'm like, why have I not done this in the past? This is just a way of intentionally showing kids that, who you are is connected to the books that you're interested in reading as well. And
I first of all, I wanted to connect with something you just said. I interviewed Nikki Robertson back in the fall. Oh. And so I think I posted it technically the first week of November. So she's the EdTech trailblazer. And so listeners, you can go back and listen to my episode with Nikki. And, when it comes to doing reader's advisory, it's a very different approach with our reluctant readers than it is with those kids who inhale books. Because if you go up to a reluctant reader and you ask them a question like, tell me about the last book you liked, they're instantly defeated. They are instantly defeated. They feel like I'm a failure. She thinks I actually remember a book I've read, let alone liked. And that is the worst thing you could ask to a reluctant reader. On the other hand, you have your handful of kids who inhale books. And if you say to them, what is the last book you really love to read? And they could rattle off 4. And so you really do have to take a very different approach. And especially because oftentimes students can't articulate what it is about a book they like. And so, having an opportunity for them to do like a quiz or an inventory. I'm a big fan of clipboards because it's low tech, no tech, giving them a clipboard and asking them to walk through the library and putting them in a situation where they have to come face to face with books. Oftentimes they see stuff that they wouldn't otherwise. So giving them a reason to go through your collection with a clipboard is a lot of fun too. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Fantastic. Librarians all agree that reading is its own reward, but oftentimes students find incentives very motivating. And what types of incentives? We've talked about microbadging on this podcast. How do you use incentives in a way that keeps readers returning to the library week after week and reading throughout the year?
Sometimes it's something as dumb as a sticker. I mean, middle schoolers, they think they're too cool for school, but you give them a sticker or you're like, hey, you want to earn a sticker on this? And they are like all over it. How can you help with this? Sometimes it's experiences. The very first time when you talked about microbadging, that was something that I was able to experiment with as a result of some courage from Jennifer Lewis, who you did a series with earlier this year too. And so I did create some incentives to go along with a challenge that we had done using our learning management system, LMS, all the different words, our Canvas LMS. And so I built a challenge for them and said, okay, these are some reading response activities to go along with whatever it is that you're reading. And I gave them some rubrics to kind of give them some guidance for what I wanted and said, okay, if you do 3 of these, then you're going to be able to game with your friends at school. And I rented a game truck, which is an experience that has all the gaming panels, and they are able to game with their friends. Our administration was kind enough to allow us to, and our connections teachers were kind enough to allow us to kind of pull those kids who had finished that and to let them game for their connections period. You would have thought that I gave them, because, it's funny, they game a lot, but they don't necessarily get to game with their friends at school. And so that was another experience for them to get connected. They also enjoy experiences with, experts on Skype. I had a graphic artist. He does some graphic novels. He did the Tuskegee Airs series. His name is Marcus Williams. He goes under the name Marcus the Visual. And he Skyped with our art students, but I had some students who also just enjoyed graphic novels. And I said, hey, do you want to hear this artist talk? And they were like, yes. So, things like getting to have special experiences really help. Having first dibs on the new books that come in, getting to have lunch in the library. We do a lunchtime library book club, but sometimes kids just want a quiet place to be. And that they can bring their own friends, they and a friend can have lunch in the library. So those kind of experiences work. Sometimes food is a good experience. I did a Better Together challenge where kids could read the same book, together. And if they came back and talked to me about it, we did a real quick Flipgrid video with them. And if they came back and talked to me about it for like a minute, then I gave them something that had 2 in a pack. So
Twix bar.
Twix bar, exactly. Something like that. So that, Better Together, and they got to share something, and it was not very expensive, but it was something special that became a positive, reinforcement for them to, have a positive experience in the library.
And it's not just a positive experience. It's a recognition that you as an adult they respect. And as you are building these relationships with these students, you are recognizing their achievements. And, it doesn't have to be something big because these are children who are looking for they're looking for acknowledgement from the adults who matter to them in their lives. And for that reason, somebody like yourself who is going to be their librarian year after year really does matter because they want to show you just how much they love the books in the library. And I will say and I don't want to assume everybody who's listening knows what a gaming truck is. I'll be honest, I have never seen one in my neighborhood, but I happen to know with my nieces and my nephew in Arizona, this is a common something that you see. But if you can imagine, listeners, if I'm not mistaken, Wendy, it's a semi-truck. It's a semi-truck, and the kids walk in from one end, and the inside is completely, you are encircled by nothing but screens and different games. And these are very popular for birthday parties for kids of a certain age. And so I have to imagine you achieved instant hero status with the kids that day. But again, it goes back to this recognition, and whether it's a picture on the wall or you are just giving them part of your time and acknowledging them as readers. And it makes me think about when you said dibs, and it warms my heart because as a person of a certain age, the fact that the term dibs, resurrects childhood memories of calling dibs on, just about everything when you grow up with 3 siblings. But when you show that kind of, I don't want to say preferential treatment, but when you bring books to kids because you say, I know you're waiting for this book, or I know you like this author, or I know you of all my students would really love this book. Giving kids that kind of recognition, they just light up.
Well, I think that you're exactly. I think it's about, again, seeing the kid for who they are. You get me. I mean, having somebody, just to acknowledge you, say, hey, I may be wrong about this, but I really think that you're going to like this book. I do this, that kind of personal shopping for especially like our EL students and my special ed kids. And I work really closely with our at-risk populations, with their teachers, and say, okay, I want you guys to come in today. I know this is not your day, but look, the books just came in. Come in and let's talk some of these out. Tell me what you think is good about these. So not only that, I'm getting their student voice about what they want to see more of, but also that they get the special, oh, hey, you guys get sneak preview. So several times I've just grabbed 3 books for the kids based on what I know about them, and just said, hey, I may be off base, but I want you to tell me what of this I got wrong. Okay, so that way I can make better choices for you next time. And sometimes they just came in and I said, today is your lucky day. I went shopping for you. And they were like, what? And so I wrapped up the books and I tied them with a bow. And I'd put their name on each of those they were little silly packages, but I just tied them with a little ribbon. And so walked them through and said, this was for you. I picked these out for you. And they were like, oh. I said, they're already checked out in your name. Really? They didn't have to do any work. Which sometimes is a barrier in the library. But when somebody can say, hey, I did these for you. If you don't like them, let me know what you didn't care for. And that's okay. You won't hurt my feelings except for a little bit.
Well, and I think that, I think the fun thing is when kids recognize that our job is to excite them about reading. You work by yourself. I know it's hard to do something like this. I have sometimes during a break or during lunch, I'll go and try and generate a list. It's if you like this, the novelist, and I'll generate a novelist printout and put it in their teacher mailbox and say, hey, hand this to such and such during 4th period. And it's a list of books. Or if a kid gets started on a series, I'll go and print up the whole series. And I say, listen, you can check these off as you read them. And it really does. And then take that next step and introduce them to the author's website so that they can go total fan guy, total fan girl.
Right. That's so funny that you mentioned that too, because that was one of the things that this past summer, I let kids check out books. And once I had gotten all the books out and I had a kind of a handle of what was checked in and what was checked out, I let the kids come, and COVID, that's a whole nother story, but I let the kids come and check out whatever they wanted to for the summer. And I had one kid who checked out all of the Percy Jackson books, all the Rick Riordan books. And so when he brought them back, I'm like, did you read them all? He goes, I read them all. And so we took a picture of him with the stack and we tagged him on social media and he responded. So that was, again, instant credit. That's one of the other things too, shout outs on social media for those kids who do have, especially Instagram. I don't do Snapchat and I don't do TikTok. I'm just not there yet with those. But Martha, again, has encouraged me to, do better with my Instagram. So I've started doing more shout outs for kids on social media that way. And they are thrilled to getting recognition, especially when an author will kind of tag themselves back in.
Well,
again.
And you can't beat the price. So
Right.
You can't beat the price.
Right.
All right. You have a blog, and friends, I'm going to attach a link in the show notes, and your blog is called Impossible Possibilities. And I noticed that you have a 2-part series on using your learning management system, your LMS, to build a community of readers. And friends, these are some terrific strategies, both in how we ended our current school year and, sadly for most of us, how we will be starting the upcoming school year. Did you want to share a little bit about what went into putting that together?
Yeah, well, what was exciting was that I had started this, as being in the library, we don't necessarily have the same experience with the learning management system as our teachers do. And I wanted to be able to make sure I could support my teachers. So I really started digging deep and said, okay, I got to figure this out. How is this going to look for the library? And so it happened that our school system does a reading challenge every March. And it has a theme to it, and that kind of stuff. And I thought, well, and it was called Level Up and that year. And that's why I was like, I'll do a book challenge. And that's where we got the game truck idea. So I made a choice board of all these different reading response activities that the kids could do. And so they had to come to me and sign up and say, yeah, I want to do this. And I would send out announcements and kind of say I give them a leaderboard idea where things were and where they were on the, 2 out of 3 or 1 out of 3 they've done these activities. And I just noticed that kids were really engaged. I started printing out some of the submissions. A lot of kids chose, I did a lot of technology infused activities with it too, like use Minecraft to build your character's ideal, living situation, where would they want to live? And I had a kid who did one for Warriors, the Warriors series. And so I took a screenshot of his Minecraft habitat and put it out there. And a lot of kids had done Warrior series for a lot of, they did memes. Memes were like huge for them to do, but I would print them out just as kind of discussion starters and for kids to be able to say, that's all they had to do? Oh, let me sign up for this and I can do it. So it did become kind of a little competitive, but it also had discussion points for kids to talk about the other books that they were reading, or, oh yeah, I read that too, or that meme is funny because, blah, blah, blah. And so noticing that the kids were really able to come together, number one, for a common cause, to be able to game with their friends, but also to be able to celebrate their reading in a way that was not accelerated reader, focused or quiz focused or fill out a summary, just in a different way that could play to their strengths. This year, we did, the theme was Reading Rocks. And so fortunately, we had about 2 weeks worth of Reading Rocks when COVID hit. And so I automatically had like 209 kids that I had already had in this challenge. And that's how I was able to connect with those kids over the digital learning days. I had that. And then I had also done a library leaderboard class as well, where kids could, if they did volunteer hours or if they participated in makerspace activities, if they had done a reading book club, if they were part of the reading bowl, I was just trying to figure out new ways for kids to get involved in the library outside of just being a reader. So, whether they were a leader in terms of creating, a book, a display or an idea for a challenge, so just trying to get feedback from kids and continuing that conversation. So between those two library management system classes, I was able to have a community of about 500 kids who could hear my message, could hear messages of encouragement from the library, could participate in our Teams meetings. The very first time I did a Teams meeting with our kids, 18 showed up, and they were it was the first time that we had seen each other in a week or so. And we just kind of looked at each other, and, everybody met each other's pets and stuff. But that community, it was pretty profound. And for me as an educator too, I was pining for our kids. I was missing them. And so having that face-to-face component, virtual face-to-face component, that kind of put the heart and soul back into the learning management community experience. So when we had that Teams integration into our LMS, it changed everything.
Well, and I think that a lot of this points to just what a fantastic opportunity some of this, remote learning and distance learning happened, because all of a sudden, librarians had an opportunity to be one of those facilitators who brought together our students in a place that was safe and moderated. This isn't a free-for-all. It's going to be guided. It is, because I held office hours and I had students, and this was sometimes the longest I had ever been able to talk to them uninterrupted. And, you aren't trying to do 4 things when you're trying to meet with your students during your virtual office hours. And I think not only is it a great opportunity for you to build those communities virtually, but invariably there's an adult somewhere in that room. There is oftentimes, when these kids are learning remotely, there is an adult in the room somewhere, and they, oh, what are you doing? Oh, I'm getting together with my librarian. You're like, what? You mean an adult who's not your teacher and who wants to talk with a bunch of you? Yeah, that sounds fantastic. And what a great way to get not only your students on board and invested in your program, whether it's IRL or virtually, but also your families who are recognizing that this is important to them. You're the librarian and you're giving them a reason to get together. And so I know that was an opportunity to win over some fans when I was trying to teach. I do cyberstalk you, and it's a little creepy. Listeners, you should know, if you ever want to be on the podcast, the one thing that I will do with abandon is Google you until I've decided I have enough questions to ask you about. But I don't think it's creepy. I think it's fine, because what I want you to share with us now, you have offered alternatives for fines for your students. When your students have a fine on a book, presumably because they've lost a book or the book has been ruined beyond a place where you can circulate it, would you tell us how you do that? Because for those of us who sort of walk into a program, this is the way it's always been done. If a kid ruins a book, they have to pay for it. There really isn't another option, but you've clearly found one. Could you share with us what you've done?
Absolutely. So my whole thing is that I would rather have a reader. Fines, they've done some research, and I can't give you the study, but research has shown that fines are the number one obstacle for people to enjoy the library and to be a library user. They don't want to have to owe money to the library for a lost book or a damaged book or having books that late. They don't want that financial obligation. And I've always taken the approach that books are paper and cardboard. They're consumables. So we do need to even though, yes, we have a responsibility to be good caretakers of the resources that we've been given, we also have to have grace. There's a lot of opportunities for us to fail in this world and still keep going. And so, I believe in restorative justice. So if something happens, for example, to a book, and especially, and I tell the kids this at the beginning of the year, if they come and have a conversation with me, that cuts whatever their responsibility is in half. I think that having a difficult conversation with an adult is a terrifying thing. And so if they can start having some, practice in doing that, that cuts their fine in half. So if it's a $20 book, I'll take $10 of the responsibility because you had a $10 conversation with me. And then, so we'll split that. So if it's a lost book or it's been damaged or something like that, we'll split that in half. If the book is damaged and you don't report it or you don't tell me about it, you will also have the opportunity to help with some sweat equity. So helping around in the library, 10 minutes of work in the library equals $1. So I think that's, pretty darn good. $6 an hour for, maybe, hey, clean off these tables, or would you wipe down the computer keyboards, or, would you help straighten this? And also that allows for, again, a deeper relationship. Oh, I really appreciate you coming to tell me about that. Oh, hey, hey, you did a great job in, taking, care of the dusting of the bottom of the shelves, that kind of thing. Just, giving some love back to the library. They can read off their fines. They can, so if they'd like to, they just read with any teacher, any adult in the building, and 10 minutes of reading equals $1 off of their fines. And like I said, they're just, get a signature from whoever. I said, that's, a lot of times I'll get that out of, they'll take care of their fines if they're in school suspension. It's a win-win situation, I think.
Absolutely. And I do want to emphasize there is an issue that I've run into, and I'm sure other people have, is sometimes students are so concerned about showing you the damage in the book that they will do their darndest to repair the book on their own. And if there's one thing, I really do try to send this message home to my students, and that is I would rather repair the book myself. And I usually, I was just like, how about, and I lie. I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. Nobody in library school ever taught me how to repair a book. No, but if I want to learn how to repair a book, I go onto YouTube. But when it comes to book repair, I have said to them, I said, look, I have been doing this for longer than you've all been alive. And if I repair a book, I want to repair it so that other kids can enjoy it. And I have in my collection at least 2 books, which were sorry excuses for somebody's effort who thought that I would somehow not notice this. And my favorite book, I should probably just put this on Instagram, but it's a really heavy Disney cookbook, and the pages were all high gloss and they're super heavy. And the well-intentioned adult taped with the strongest of tape. I could only ruin it by taking it apart, but they taped the back cover upside down. So if you hold the book open, the front is fine, but the back is completely taped upside down. And I didn't catch it, but it has forever been, for the last 12 years, my example of, friends, what's wrong with this book? And they're like, Mrs. Herman, the back's not upside down. I said, is this a book I fixed? And they're like, no, why would you do that? And I'm like, exactly. So I love that you are trying to circumvent this idea that the onus is on them to repair a book that's been damaged, because that is just about the worst thing. And it's not, it doesn't ever work out as well as it could be in the hands of somebody who's going to take their time. So thank you for making sure that came out. I love that these are alternatives, and you certainly are going to win allies and not alienate your readers, because I think it is so hard when stuff comes back to us ruined, or it's just permanently lost. And those kids, the last thing they want to do is disappoint me, but they really don't want to be talking to your parents about this either. It's like, I've lost this book, and if I tell my parents, they're going to make me break into that piggy bank, and I don't want to do that. So
right, and I'd rather them have get the experience of having what it's like to have a hard conversation. And for always, the very first thing I say to them when they come to me is, I'm like, thank you. That was difficult, and you did a great job. That's exactly what I wanted you to do. I mean, I would hope that somebody would do that for me, saying, hey, you admitted that you were wrong. Could we ask for anything better than that?
What a teachable moment.
Right. It's incredible.
That's something that I will personally say I need to work on, because I need to have a lot more grace when it comes to my students who just, the books die an ugly death. And I'm just like, oh, dude, those were brand new. All right. So let me ask you, I want to pivot. I've learned that you have a foreign language collection in your library. And I'm curious because I don't. I just think this is fantastic because it gives your students yet another reason to love coming to your library. Can you tell me a little bit about how you've developed this collection?
Well, I inherited a good collection from several librarians before me, and I hadn't really done it justice. And so I talked to several of my EL kids and said, look, number one, how is it best for you guys to find the books that are in your language? I mean, do you want me to put them in a section? Do you want me to spread them out? How do you want to look? And they're like, we want them all together. And I said, okay, great. What kinds of books do you want? And they're like, we want everything. And I was like, okay, so let's take a look. And I led them over to Tidal Wave. And I said, here's how I'm going to make a list. Here's how you look for books that are in your language, and I want you to dump in what you can find. And I said, well, and then we'll go from there. The series that the kids wanted above and beyond, a big surprise to no one, is the Wimpy Kid series. They wanted, so I got the first Wimpy Kid book in every language that we could secure. The only one I was not able to get was Portuguese. I was so frustrated because I had one kid who spoke Portuguese and really, really wanted to read it in Portuguese. And it's funny because I asked, I'm like, do you not like the Wimpy Kid books in English? They're like, no. And I had a kid who said this, and I will never forget this, that they said, it just tastes better when I read it in my own language.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, I about cried. So we started with Percy Jackson. We started with Wimpy Kid. We started getting graphic novels. All the Raina Telgemeier books are also in Spanish. I just tried to start catching as many as I could in the languages that are spoken at our school. And anytime that a kid wants to put that together, I guess the very first year we put it together, we are blessed with a very generous budget in our county, and so I put a big chunk of our book collection toward beefing it up so that it was more modern. We had some really good biographies and books that were bilingual, which was great to be able to have, the book that, it had it both in Spanish and in English. And it was great for our Spanish language, 8th graders, the kids who were taking Spanish there. So we put a big chunk at it. I had my students who had helped me throughout, again, they became our EL special project library advisory. And I had them pick out a special sticker to stick on the books. So we indicated all those books. When I got them, I cataloged them, and we found a place to put them. And we ended up placing all these books right close to, we have our graphic novels are in their own section, and we put the EL books right next to the graphic novels. And I find it, and because I asked the kids, where do you want it? They're like, we like the graphic novels. We want it right next to it, because a lot of our emergent English learners, find graphic novels to be a good bridge for them. And also they're able to carry around a book that looks like everybody else's, and they're not reading some, baby looking book, so but they're still getting the richness of the story. And so those books, it doesn't look suspicious to them that they're moving over into this foreign language series as well. It's created a lot of just interest. Oh, sorry. We also had a grand opening of the section where the kids got to cut the ribbon, and we cut it every period during the period that they came in. And so it was just a really good opportunity to, again, create community. The kids are just, again, they just kind of leap when they're over, and they find the book that is in their tongue.
Well, and friends, I'm just going to promote my podcast here for a minute. On March 1st, I posted an episode called Supporting ELLs, and I interviewed a librarian who is also ELL certified, and how she builds her collection to support English language learners. And so a lot of this, it's fantastic. And I will say, I learned my lesson, because I should have quite a collection of Italian books in Italian for my students, because we have a significant number of students whose families are Italian, and they're here working with their families, are here working with the university. And I thought, I'll just order the books through the central library, through our public branch, and have them delivered to the families. And the families had said, we'd love some books for our children in Italian. And I thought I was being spectacular. I ordered some books through the public library. But of course, when you do those ILLs, you are not seeing the books yourself. You are simply looking at the record on the screen. And I thought, that doesn't matter. It's going to be great. These families are going to love these books. And, the next time I saw them for drop off in the morning, I'm like, buongiorno. And this fellow pulled me aside, and he's like, I appreciate what you did. However, quite a few of the books that you sent were meant for adults. And without the benefit of seeing, previewing these books ahead of time, he said that the content was meant for adults, and I appreciate your efforts, but we're not going to do that again. And I was so embarrassed. Now, that parent and I have, we have a great relationship, and I love working with his kids, and they are some of the best readers we have in the building in English, readers of, and they're just inhaling these books in English. But yeah, that was a misstep on my part. And I was just trying to be ambitious and help these families. And I thought, whoa, I really, really stepped in it this time. So yeah, friends, I'll tell you, I think housing these books in your own collection will circumvent that problem right away. So absolutely. I had to do a lot of learning to get ready for our conversation, a lot of research about you, but I'd like to know where you get your inspiration, because I think that you are, you find, all these ideas you have come from somewhere. So could you tell me a little bit about where you get your inspiration for the programming that you implement?
So every year we have a Maker Monday program, and that kind of provides the framework for whatever else I'm doing in the library. But I always make sure that I get my calendar for Maker Monday straight first, because if I don't put it down, if I don't put it down in writing, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen as intentionally, right? Mm-hmm. So, and also it provides some accountability to me, for me, to the kids, and also the parents, so they can say, oh, what's this going to be? That being said, so I have this challenge for myself. So what we do, our Maker program, it looks more like, I guess I've modeled it after Project Runway and Top Chef, that you do have these generalized challenges, and then you're going to just try to make it work, as Tim Gunn would say. And so I kind of create the projects based on the inspirations from those shows. I don't know if you've seen like American Ninja Warrior. Mm-hmm. That Ninja Warrior, that series that where they go through all the obstacles and that kind of thing. I turned that into a maker activity with our PE. It was a collab with our PE department. And so I said, hey, could we just use the gym and use the equipment? We pinky promise we'll put it all back. So, the kids created their own obstacle course based on the American Ninja Warrior series. And so it became a physical challenge, but also a building challenge, because they had to make sure it was safe, it was doable, but it was also challenging. And so that's a lot of fun. Those kind of ideas about looking at something sideways. I go to a lot of places that are curated, performance spaces, gallery spaces, art museums, plays, parks, and see how they approach it, because everything that you're in those environments, how they approach delivering information. And so I kind of transform that, that way. Looking a lot at, the PLN. I mean, Twitter is so robust these days. I mean, I learned about Twitter back in 2000, with Buffy Hamilton a million years ago, like when I was still teaching. I'm going to say like 2005. And she's like, you got to bring your personal learning network together. And I'm like, okay, Buffy, you tell me to do that. So I'm going to get on Twitter. And I didn't realize that how fast I grew, because, one of us, any singular one of us is not as smart as all of us are together, right? And so, getting those ideas and being able to harvest from other people, and being able to put your own personal school's twist on it. It's pretty amazing how that, how it all kind of comes together.
Well, and I think that we do in this podcast, we try to foster this sharing community when we're building this group of listeners around the world. And when you realize that if I incorporate one of your fantastic ideas into my program, it in no way diminishes yours. So if I take something that I learned from this conversation and I implement it tomorrow or the next day or a year from now, it in no way makes your program anything less. But my program now, I am benefiting from your expertise, and rising tide lifts all boats. We want to make sure that our profession is being recognized for all the good that we do when it comes to raising our readers. So I appreciate that. So friends, we will be sharing out Wendy's social media in just a minute, but anytime we can learn from one another, it really does just bring the contribution we bring to our schools and to our school communities, all that much more. I'm aware, because I follow you on social media, that you are keeping your book club ongoing during the summer. I think that's fantastic. Can you tell us a little bit about your STEM nights? Because your STEM nights, I was like, what?
So our kids, so the Maker Monday group, these kids, like I said, we do design challenges where I say, okay, I want you to solve this problem. I want you to solve, for example, like at the beginning of the year, locker personalization. Locker personalization is a big issue. I want you to solve this problem in the next 45 minutes, your own way. All you got is cardboard and hot glue. Now, hot glue is hot, so we have to do a little safety lesson on that because everybody's going to get burned at some point. But this is what you've got. Here are your two things. You guys designed the problem. So the kids are used to, working with making design prototypes and things like that. Well, and so and then we kind of branch off. But what that core group of kids they always rise to the occasion. So here's me. I decided, these kids they're smart. They're pretty versatile. Maybe we might want to do something like this on a larger scale. And why don't we do a STEM night? Because these are really, really cool kids and they have a perspective. So I said to them, I guess this is back in maybe 2014. And I said, I think that we should do a STEM night. But I don't want to just do some weird STEM night. I want to make sure that we have a theme for it. And so that first year is when we got the reboot of the Star Wars franchise, and everybody was really excited about it. And I'm like, okay, so what theme do y'all want? And they're like, oh, we want Star Wars. And so I had to go to my principal, and he's like, it's just a movie. He goes, why don't you just do it as just a STEM night? I'm like, no, it's Star Wars. Star Wars is not a movie. It is a culture. I said, this is 35 years of living, and these people and their parents and their, these kids are really excited about it. So we created stations for people to go to, and I gave the kids decided how they wanted to go about, talking about Star Wars in terms of STEM activities. So they built, there's a station where they could build the Death Star using marshmallows and pasta, right? There were about like how, could you create a language? And they used GarageBand to do that. There's, a bunch of different activities that the kids came into, and we had standards. Like an essential questions for each one of these stations. And so I brought the essential questions to my principal, and he was like, "Oh, I see what you're talking about now," because he really wanted to have some standards behind things. And I was like, yeah, party on, we can do that. So we did that at night. And the first year we had 50 people. The second year we had 70. Then last year we had about 100 people come. And these are not just middle school kids. These are the parents. These are their younger brothers and sisters. We've done Harry Potter. We've done Pokemon. This year we did Minecraft. And we had the robustness of Minecraft EDU behind it, and so that was really fantastic. Where the kids, there was a Minecraft building challenge. They had to build something in 10 minutes, and so like at the end, and they were all at this one station. And the kid who was leading it had built this environment that. All they had to do is there's a wall of cotton. Don't ask me how they did that, but a wall of wool. And so they burnt the wall of wood so everybody could see what everybody else had built. And so they, as a group, at the end of the 10 minutes said, oh yeah, this person won this one. So they came together as a decision. It was a collaborative decision on who had won that challenge for that station. All kinds of skills, all kinds of,
team building, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was. And what was beautiful is that, I kind of gather the materials together. I'm like, okay, so what is it that you need? I kind of become the project manager. Mm-hmm. And then we do talk about, okay, how do you render good customer service at your station? The kids would go around and visit each other's station and pretend to be, the next person who was coming up. And so the kids really, their leadership skills and their communication skills just blossomed by leaps and bounds. And it's such a beautiful thing every year to see, we get 15, 18 kids, working together and building stations that are engaging and have kids think differently about what it is to have science, technology, engineering, and math. And we also include the arts in there. Well, so we have a real STEAM program.
Again, anytime, this is the kind of showcase activity that projects your school in a positive light. You're going to get your administrator on board, because when the school looks good, your administrator looks good. And your administrator, yes, is going to attribute the success of this, to the students who planned, but also point back to the librarian who, as the sponsor of this, you're the facilitator of this activity, you made this happen. And so it really does give your administrator yet another reason to value you as a member of the staff. Quickly, I did want to ask you, because I included in our show notes, friends, I was able to find several of Wendy's it's your end of year summaries, these sort of annual reviews of your program. And friends, I encourage you to look at it because it gave me a very comprehensive idea of the kinds of things that Wendy did in her program over the last couple of years. But I wanted to point to something specifically, and that is you included in your year review or your year summary your goal setting, meaning looking forward, what do you want to do looking ahead? And I think that's ambitious, but it's very risky to put down to write down and then, I don't know, just publish what it is you hope to achieve in your next school year. And I think that's very ambitious. Can you speak to the decision that you have to do that? Because not everybody would say, I'm going to put this down so everybody can see what my goals are for next year, looking ahead.
It's accountability, right? Again, similar to me putting the Maker Monday schedule together at the beginning of the year. Because otherwise, if I just do it week by week, then it may or may not happen, or it may not be as thought through. I want to be intentional about my goals. And I also want to let my administration know what it is that I need, what it is that I struggle with, what I need from them, and where I think we can do better. And so, so I always put, goals and then what I need from those goals. And a lot of times it is, I need additional members. One year I asked for, more library advisory support from teachers. And I also needed to find a way to be able to get involved in PLC meetings because I am by myself. And so, COVID helped that happen because, I was able to attend so many of those Teams meetings with my faculty and staff, and to be able to say, oh, I've got this resource. It's already digitized. It's already online. It's already open. It's a free resource that we can use, that we have this relationship already with this company. So it's not something that has to be additionally vetted by our county. So those relationships, I think that they, think that my administration, when I say, hey, I really need this, then they can, that can be a point of conversation, or at least a conversation starter.
Sure. Well, and listeners, I had a conversation earlier this spring with Casey Boyd, and Casey Boyd in our episode, #Good Trouble and Advocacy, she talked about having a seat at the table. And if you don't have a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. And as you said, Wendy, having a virtual seat at the table is almost, there's more opportunities because now you can be another person at this Teams meeting that you have, or for us, our district, it's a Google Meet. You can attend more of these meetings because you're physically, that impediment isn't there. And asking to be a part of these conversations is on us. We do need to speak up and say, I would like to be more part of a conversation and be able to contribute in these decisions that are being made. You are an absolute delight. Wendy, would you please share with us how listeners can follow you on social media? The links you've included in our show notes are really fantastic. And I know that a lot of us would like to see all the things you have planned moving forward in your programming.
Oh, great. Yeah. I on Twitter as at Wendy P, as in Patrick Cope, Wendy P Cope. And then on Instagram, our library Instagram is Woodstock MS Library. And, you can follow me on the Impossible Possibilities blog that's on Weebly. I wanted to thank you too, Amy, for asking me about the blog, because it's something that I've been meaning to work back on resurrecting. And, and it really, this pause, this COVID pause has allowed me to do a lot more reflection. I'm sure that a lot of us are being a lot more intentional that way. And so it's given me an opportunity to kind of pause, reflect, refresh, and hopefully, communicate a little bit better. And and maybe other people are doing the same thing, and we can all learn from each other.
Wonderful. Well, listen, Wendy, I truly hope our paths cross in the future, and I wish you the best of the summer as you look forward and enjoy what we have as this opportunity to reflect and pause and then think about our next year.
Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful.
I can't thank Wendy enough for sharing some of her summer vacation with me to record our conversation. As with all my episodes, be sure to visit the resources in our show notes. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. As I mentioned at the top of the show, this is Season 2's finale, and I'm really proud of how this podcast has grown and evolved. Season 2 began on August 30th, 2019, and includes 43 episodes. I'm going to take a break for several weeks, and I'll return in mid-August with Season 3. I wanted to take this opportunity to state something which is very important to me in this endeavor. We all have something to share. And for that reason alone, I can guarantee you we're not going to run out of ideas anytime soon. This podcast wouldn't be what it has become without listener participation. When you consider the inspiration for the episodes which get broadcasted each week, I'd like you to ask yourself how you might get involved. Season 1 didn't feature any interviews, so most of those topics really should be revisited with somebody who'd be interested in tackling it. Some of my episodes address common struggles. Many of my episodes begin as listener requests or trends and topics which we see on social media. Sometimes the podcast gods smile and I get an out-of-the-blue email, which is really a gift. And I love showcasing your presentations, which are done at ed camps and conferences in your own state. And I'll never have the time or the money or the opportunity to attend your sessions, so featuring them on the podcast is a great way to extend this learning opportunity to listeners across the United States and around the world. So, what happens when we decide to collaborate on an episode? It occurred to me that the only people who know this are people who've actually agreed to be interviewed on the show. So, what I do is I begin with an exchange between you and me, and I'll ask you for a Gmail address. I ask my guests to also share resources and links which our listeners can access. I generate a shared Google Doc, which you and I edit and we agree upon. And then I use Skype and I ask my guests for about an hour of your time. Skype has been a really reliable platform for me when I record. And you don't need a microphone, but you definitely need a pair of earbuds plugged into your device, which it helps improve the quality of the recording. I will edit like crazy, doing my best to mute the lawnmowers and the dog barks and the occasional F-bomb, which I have been known to drop. And it's as simple as that. That's all it takes to be on the show. I hope to hear from you. I wish you all a very restful summer, and please stay well.